Because my second uploader, for example, is a debutante to BBC Upload. David Pearman from Southend is with us, and he's got a poem called The Toothless Moon. And we'll find out why it's called that in just a moment. But firstly, David, it's lovely to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Rob?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you very much. It's lovely to have, new people involved in BBC Upload. It's chuffed to bits that, more people are getting involved, even though we've been doing this 2 and a bit years. It's nice. It's nice that people don't feel like it's an alien thing, like, oh, I'm too late to the show, and that's okay. But do you mind me asking, like, what made you send us something now? What was it that made you send us Toothless Moon?
Well, a few months ago, I started performing at poetry venues for the first time, and
Nice.
one of the people there said that he was on your show, I think a couple of months ago. I think his name was Ian. And I thought, you know what, why don't I try and upload something? I uploaded something. A few hours later, they told me they wanted me on the show. So I'm extremely honored to be here.
David, that fills me with joy as well to hear that, someone has recommended you send it our way. You've done so, and here we are chatting about it tonight. That's great news. And look, please understand that when you're ready, if you're ready to send us something you've made, no matter how long you've been doing it for, we will take as much care as we can possibly take with your art, because it's only right to do so. So recently got into performing, your poetry out loud. So before that, had you been writing quite a lot before you finally kind of went, right, I'm gonna perform this, or is this all quite a new adventure for you?
So I started writing when I was about 18. I'm 30 now. I started writing, I think it was back in April of this year. So, I'd been writing for about 11 years before I decided to, bite the bullet and start performing. I think it's a huge step. It's one
Yeah.
thing to be able to write poetry. It's another to be able to perform it in front of people. And I just kind of was at a point in my life where I just kind of thought, you know what, let's do it. Let's share my work and see what people think. And it's also a great way to kind of meet people and network and find other venues and other ways of getting your work out there. Hence why I'm here.
It's you're absolutely right, David. It can't be overlooked how, nerve-wracking, perhaps, I think might be the right word. Hopefully not misusing it. To stand up in front of people, strangers, sometimes people and perform that. And like Andy said, like for him, he writes these rhymes and he doesn't put them anywhere else. He just sends them in to us to share on the radio, and that's A-OK as well. So, you don't have to perform them or perform what you do. If you just want to write it, to send it our way and we can share it on. Again, absolutely fine by me, no problem whatsoever. But it's lovely to be able to include new people, who maybe have been doing something for a long time. If you've been doing it for 10 or 11 years, like David has, again, when you feel ready to send it this way, it's amazing. I mean, also, the other thing I have to ask you, David, is what do you read that has given you such a beautiful vocabulary? Because I have listened to Toothless Moon twice today already, because it's honestly, it's like mesmerizing. I can't, once I hit play, that's it. The rest of the room disappears. I'm in the story completely with you. But what are you reading, or maybe watching, perhaps, that's kind of enriched your vocabulary, the way you use it?
Well, firstly, can I just say it's a very lovely and sweet thing for you to say. I'm really touched by that. In terms of my vocabulary, you know what? Whenever I hear a word I don't know the meaning of, the first thing I do is I go and look it up. And I think poetry and writing and creativity in general is a great way to kind of exercise your vocabulary.
Yeah.
It's one thing to learn a word, it's another thing to be able to use it. And I think, I just try and read anything and everything. Anything I ever thought about, I'll read up on it. Like, for example, I was reading about cathedrals recently and why they're called cathedrals. I was reading about why, certain countries have certain names, just because I had the thought in my head and I thought, you know what, let's go and do it. And plus, I have a lot of time on my hands just because I kind of, I grew up I didn't really have many friends. So I kind of just stayed at home and just kind of read all the time. And yeah, that's basically why my vocabulary is what it is.
Listen, some people grow up with a real love of books, and for them, turning to books or stories, it is your escapism, and that's where you find your friends. I think there's a lot to be said about like having imaginary friends and things, especially when you grow up. But as a grown up, like it's a kind of there seems to be some sort of almost an embarrassment about like having an imagination or wanting to be, escape, reality and having a break from things. We love watching movies, yes, fine, or we love going to concerts, stand up gigs, whatever it is. But to do something ourselves and to expose how we feel and share emotions artistically, a lot of people kind of shy away from it, and it's not a criticism of people who maybe do feel that, but I want to encourage as many grown-ups to do that, whether you're in your 20s, your 50s, or your 80s. It does not matter. If you've got something to express, try and express it in whatever way you see fit. Poetry has rules, but you know what? They're there for breaking. So is storytelling. Storytelling's got rules, but break the rules. Who cares? The best bits of art, the longest standing pieces of art, are the ones that broke the norms and changed the way we perceive certain things as well. I need to know now you've brought it up. Where did the word cathedrals come from? Like, do you remember where that came from? Because I don't know why cathedrals are called cathedrals, not churches.
So basically, the difference between a church and a cathedral is a church is any space where people go to worship on a regular basis, whereas a cathedral is a place. Is a church that is the seat of a bishop. The word cathedral comes from the Greek word cathedra, which means chair, basically.
Every day's a school day. You didn't think you were going to be learning that on a Thursday night with me at 9 o'clock, did you? Hey, but you have. Thanks to David, of course. Thanks to David, of course. David, I mean, don't know if you share much of your work elsewhere. Say performing it at the Poetry Club is great, and sending it to us, very, very grateful for. But is there anywhere else people can find, Toothless Moon or anything else you've written and performed?
You know what? I don't share it that often online, but I have a YouTube channel. It's called David Poetry. I've only uploaded one performance of me performing a poem that I did, and it was actually my very first performance. But I plan to upload more. So there's no permanent place right now, but I definitely plan to do that in the future.
Well, I hope that this is the seed that needed planting to kind of, encourage you forward to do that, because I think, more and more people need to hear and see your work, David. I'm chuffed to bits that you've sent it to us and we get to share it on the show tonight. And so without giving too much away, and before we say thank you and good night, David, is there anything extra you'd like us to know about Toothless Moon before we play it?
Well, I think growing up, I always felt like I was an old head on young shoulders, and for that reason, I think I have been very jaded and bitter for quite a long time. And there's this underlying sense that my prime has been behind me, and I suppose the poem was me trying to reconcile the idea of kind of growing older, but kind of losing your youth, but gaining something else. Finding grace and getting older, and also realizing that memories and acknowledging the past is important. It's good not to rely on the past, but to find positives in the past, and not to fall back on regret, I suppose. Easier said than done, but I put it in a poem, so there you go.
Very much easier said than done, but we can but try. And that's the main thing. David, lovely to meet you. Lovely to have you on the show tonight on BBC Essex. Thank you. Before you go, David, will you do us the honours of introducing your piece, please?
Absolutely. So my name is David Pearman, and this is my poem, Toothless Moon.
Ides of June, but no casual sunburn, no thick night air pushing against our clothless bodies. The middling shadows of spring still remain, and there are still just as many flies in my coffee. Summer may continue to grow uncertain evermore. Luscious tall fields of grass may now only be the fond recollection of a modest sward. And though halcyonic gardens may stay lodged in the memory, she's no longer an impartial nature. Just enough sympathy for the insects, but not enough for the cockroaches. Yet street-bound children still aimlessly wander, with no reason in their footsteps but to bridge every pavement crack with their feet. Where the dead of night may rest for some, that's where it shall be at its most alive for others, who tread foolhardy down endless starlit corridors, and, like those stars, shall only project their youth. The moon is but a pale memory for the likes of Jupiter and Saturn, who were still licking the edges of their envelopes, even when mobile phones were going off in pockets and on coffee tables, and fiber optics were plundering the limits of the universe. I am Jupiter. I am Saturn. Now staring into the black void of the coffee cup, met by an initial sense of trespassing as I remember old joys. I see the bygone folded neatly like a sweater, knitted with the bittersweet yarns of nostalgia and the unruly guidance of time's cold needles. As the hungry oblivion of Leth's greed begs another sunset to fall into its open jaws, old photos slip like those very same sunsets beyond the horizon of a wooden desk. I've heard old friends calling to me from the ones I'd rescued from the dust years later, only to tease a faint smile from my lips and then be tossed out with the rest. And its sound was like a message written on the walls of a school bathroom, where now cars horn and dogs bark in suburban orchestras, leaping through double-glazed windows to haunt the settled ghosts that were once bright lights in fluorescent days, where scars of crescent shapes wear mocking sideways smiles, and the toothless moon at night reminds the youthless all the while that old highs may be sought out anew and become fresh lows in modern light. Bygone joys are often dragged down the stairs of memory to pain's door until a remembered happiness can be remembered happily, not a minute more. And pain may never ascend, nor transfigure, nor change in any similar fashion. Its nature feels more permanent, the scar to joy's kissing bruise, ephemeral passion. Freedom is not youth, but the forgetting of youth, the crooked tongue of a most bitter man had once said, and as I hear his words swinging back and forth pendular in my mind, I cannot help but see the years that were filled for the purpose of carrying something, one day worth being emptied out of the dusty pockets of time that held more than just lint and old pieces of chewing gum. We may never notice the weightlessness that holds us as the wind holds our wings, until faced with the gravity of age and death that might bow one day in respect to a soul that is grand. Old, but grand. But what makes a soul grand, save for the feeling that memory might let us believe that we'd even been alive to die in the first place? To have laughed with uncontrollable ease and still have all your blood where it counts? To conjure up all those iridescent spectres of reflection that haunt your mind behind the creaking doors to the dusty rooms of your soul, and know that those rooms still echo for a reason? So why forget? Why not trespass in graves? The spirit board, too often used out of regret, must only remind oneself of all the ghosts that never behaved, and that they had good reason not to. Never forget. And never forget the rise and fall, or the emotion armed with unending control, and the past that may continue to hurt on occasion, and yet accompany us warmly through our better days, that make us something more in the eyes of time that is burning, and whose flame is seldom held in one's grasp. But when it is, and it burns just enough to leave a scar, never forget.
Toothless Moon by David Pearman, our second uploaded tonight on BBC Essex. If you want to be a part of the show with something you have made, bbc.co.uk/upload is how you get involved.